Here we are at Gavin's Mill, beautiful Gavin's Mill in Milngavie, and I'm with Angela Oakley, who's a volunteer and representative from the Scottish Fairtrade Forum. So welcome, Angela.
Oh, it's great to be here.
And we're going to have a conversation about the principles of fair trade and what fair trade means, and to explain a bit more.
Yeah, I'd imagine the students know quite a bit about fair trade already. How do you think they would describe it if they were asked about it? What would they think fair trade is?
I think the students would know a little bit. I guess that what they would know is what they see in the shops, the products that they see with the fair trade stamp on it.
The fair trade stamp, so they would know
logo.
They would know the fair trade logo.
I think they would see that, and they would probably know that somewhere along the line there's been an honest kind of trade and someone's been getting a fair price for their product, but apart from that I don't think they would know in depth.
So would they know the guarantees that this gives? Would they know the guarantee of the fair trade minimum price and the fair trade premium?
No, I don't think they would.
Right,
if you want to explain.
The fair trade minimum price is that anything you buy with the fair trade mark on, the worker has got a fair wage which covers the basic cost of them getting to work and basic living, like food and shelter. Or if it's a crop that they're buying from, if it's a farmer, he will have got a fair price for his crop, and that price will have been agreed in advance, paid on time, and it can't go below the minimum of what he needs to grow the crop and for the basic living, again, of food and shelter. But they get the premium on top of that, so that's a small percentage of the sale price, and that's money that they use for the community or to improve their business, and they have to agree that democratically among the community, and everybody has a say, including women who often don't get a say. And it isn't just one person who decides how to spend that money, that it's spent for the community, and it's things like schools and hospitals and roads and in improving their business. So that's that. Do you think students would know the difference between fair trade and fairly traded? Do you think if they saw that they would know the difference in those?
I think maybe they could probably have a guess. I mean, to me, I think that they would know that maybe the lower case would just be about fair trade in general, and fair trade sort of as a general term, and possibly when it's got a capital it's meant to be a certificate or a standard.
Exactly. This one here, which is all one word with capitals that you see on products, that means it's the certification that standards have been reached. It's a fair trade certification, which if it's one of these two, there's no certificate and we don't know for certain what standards have been reached. Some of them might have been reached, maybe the environmental ones might have been reached, but not the social ones. This one here, it's a different certification. It's from the World Fair Trade Organization. It's not from the same certification as this one, but it's also the main fair trade movement, or it's perhaps for things that don't have a certification yet. So for example, like electronics don't have a certification yet, but all the standards are being met, so we would give it this qualification here. So do you think your students would know that there are 10 principles of fair trade? I
think definitely one of the principles, they'd say a main one would have to be about the fair payment. I think because trade's in the word, it suggests, the payment has got to be fair. I think another principle they'd think about is the transparency and honesty about it. Again, in the word, the fair trade. They would probably expect to see about child labour and working conditions tied in with that. And also a big one, of course, is the environment. But I think apart from those ones, there's maybe a few that maybe they wouldn't recognise.
Well, definitely everything you said there. The environment, sometimes people think it's all about farmers, but it's about people and places. And I've got some postcards here with the 10 principles on, and the ones you've mentioned are here. But there's also a disadvantaged opportunities for disadvantaged producers, so that might be small farmers who can't compete with big business. Fair trade encourages them to join cooperatives. It might be disabled people, it might be people in war-torn areas that can't get the goods to the market, so fair trade supports all the disadvantaged producers. Another one is transparency and accountability, so that the workers actually have a say in how how their business is run. Fair trade practices is on here, and you think, oh, what's that? But it basically means no cheating.
Right.
So no faulty scales when they go to market, paid on time, not saying, oh, we'll pay you and then we won't. What's been happening quite a lot at the moment with COVID is, particularly in the garment industry, is that big companies place orders, but because they haven't been able to sell their goods because of COVID, they just cancel those orders. Now with fair trade that couldn't happen because they would have to consult with the suppliers before they could cancel an order that they contracted to deliver. Fair payment you mentioned, well, we've talked about the fair trade price, but it's also about it being agreed in advance and paid on time.
Right.
No child labour and no forced labour, which here we have laws about that, but in other countries that is still a huge issue. No discrimination, and that's for all the usual things like colour, race, religion, sexuality. And it's not just about hiring people, it's about no discrimination in promotion, no discrimination in training, obviously good working conditions that are safe and healthy. One that we've got down on here is capacity building.
Yeah, what's capacity building?
What's capacity building? It's making a business grow, or so perhaps using better seeds for a farmer, or better processes in the factories, or even it could just be training the workers, but allowing the business to grow so that they can flourish and improve. Promoting fair trade, making sure the advertising is honest and respect for the environment, which these days does include climate change.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, so that's the 10 principles. But
And I mean, our students, they'll be going on to maybe work with precious metals or textiles. So could you tell us a bit more about Fairtrade Gold and perhaps cotton?
Yeah, well, Fairtrade gold is such a precious, as you said, it's precious metal, and we pay such a high price for it in this country. But the people who mine it don't get any of that. It just goes all to big business. Quite often they are small scale producers, and so with fair trade they are encouraged to go into cooperatives, but it's more the working conditions. Child labour, the International Labour Organization has identified gold mining as one of the worrying areas for child labour. So there's not just child labour, but there's the conditions they work in. The gold, they use mercury and cyanide, which are poisonous. So with fair trade, it would be safe, good working conditions. They would have a say in the way the business is run, but mainly they would be kept safe. Textiles is really an interesting one, because I did a lot of campaigning about cotton. Cotton is a really thirsty crop. It uses a lot of resources to make it. And so for one example is at the Aral Sea, cotton farmers diverted the rivers that were running into the Aral Sea to their own farms, and the Aral Sea dried up, and the fishing industry died, and the leisure industry died, and the 90% of the lake, which was the world's 4th largest lake, dried up. So now there's just a dusty, salty lake floor, where before there was a beautiful lake, and so they have health issues because the dust blows around and gives them respiratory diseases. Now with fair trade, that does not happen. The environment is cared for. But with cotton as well, there is huge child labour issues in the African countries of Mali, Benin, Burkina Faso, Chad, and in India, where often the girls are asked to go into the cotton fields where the boys are in school. So cotton has been a huge injustice, I feel. It's a dirty crop, not because the cotton's not clean, it's because just of the dirty practices that are used in the production of cotton. And then once the cotton's produced, obviously it has to go to the factories, where sweatshop practices are very common, and we probably all know about the Rana Plaza disaster. I don't know whether you know, Lisa, but the workers who were in that factory in Bangladesh that collapsed with the death of over 1,000 people, those workers had been telling management, this factory is not safe, and they were told back, if you don't want to work here, you can leave, but the workers had no choice because there's no other work. And even now, many of the garments that we're wearing have been made in factories where there aren't even fire escapes. So
It's shocking.
gold textiles, there are huge problems, but fair trade gold and fair trade cotton, and where fair trade practices are certified, you can be sure of certain guarantees that the fair trade certificate gives.
And what do you think about when it comes to recycling? You know, there's a big push now for maybe recycling our metal and gold and silver, or fast fashion. They're encouraged to go to charity shops. Does it take anything away from the workers that are, you know, trying to earn a living with fair trade?
I think it's really cool to go to charity shops, and I now feel really guilty if I go to a shop that's not second hand and buy something new. I feel really bad about it. It's fine to go to charity shops, and the reasons for that are environmental. We don't have finite resources in the world. If we keep buying new shoes all the time, new clothes, new books, we're just using up the world's resources. We've got to think about climate change. It's a huge problem. So with fair trade and with charity shops or second-hand buying, you avoid those environmental issues, but the social issues as well. The pressure put on those factories to produce in such volume is not good for the workers. And yes, definitely, it really is good to go to buy second-hand.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to when you were saying about fair trade products and even electronics now, because people maybe don't realise that there's gold in their smartphones that's been mined and everything, and it's to, I think, let the students know about the supply chain and where it's actually came from, whatever they're buying.
Yeah, definitely. If you're making something, whether it's textiles or whether it's something with a precious metal or anything you make at all, be really curious. Ask, where did these raw materials come from and what conditions were they produced in? And the only reason we can tell is if it has a certificate on it, something like the Fair Trade certificate, or just by asking the questions. But dig down and ask. You don't really want to be producing something that's been produced by child or forced labour.
Yeah, because it's something that there's laws here to protect us, and it's something that we would want for ourselves. So to ask that of other people across different countries is
exactly.
well.
We have laws in this country that the people have fought to put these on the statute. Yet we're still buying things that we wouldn't accept the conditions that they're made in here, but we want it for cheap stuff from other parts of the world that would not be accepted in the Western world. We've just pushed the problem somewhere else. We haven't eradicated it.
Yeah.
We've just made sure we're all right, and we're still buying from people who are working in conditions that were outlawed here many years ago.
Right. Oh, thanks, Angela. I mean, it's really good and invaluable for students to know as well, because they're the next generation that are going on, and maybe, you know, they'll become responsible makers and think a little bit more about the materials they're making with, where it's came from and where it'll end up. So
yeah,
we really
and
appreciate that.
There's a big demand for it as well, so it's good for business, because schools are teaching about this now. People are asking these questions now, so it's good for business as well as good for the planet.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate you taking time out to speak
Oh,
today.
it's never a problem. Never a problem.
Thanks, Angela.